Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Alex. I'm a member of the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway Planning Committee, and we are so excited to welcome you to Getting to Know Your Landscape Site Inventory and Analysis with Master Ecological Landscape Designer Karin Ursula Edmondson. And I think we're right at the tail end of Pollinator Week, so it's actually a really apt time to be having this conversation. So Karin's going to be speaking, and then there's going to be a little question and answer session afterwards. So at the bottom of your screens, there is a Q&A little icon, and you can type in your questions like at any time while she's giving her presentation, and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as possible. So the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway is striving to create essential and contiguous habitat in our community for our vital pollinators who have been increasingly vulnerable due to things like climate change, habitat destruction, and herbicide and pesticide use is a really big one. So the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway is a project of the Woodstock Land Conservancy, the Catskill Center, Woodstock New York Transitions, the Woodstock Environmental Commission, and members of the community. And Karin, who is right above me, joining us tonight. So this is the first of two talks that she's going to be doing with us. The second one is going to be July 9th, so definitely sign up for that one as well. That's going to be working with your landscape, planting and care of native plants. So Karin is a landscape designer and a member of the Ecological Landscape Alliance, which is an organization that promotes sustainable approaches to landscape design, construction, and management. And she has been designing and building gardens up here in the Catskills since 2008. Basically, she spent years, really working firsthand in the soil, seeing how the insects interact, seeing how the pollinators are interacting, seeing how native plants were holding up to like a lot of the climate shifts that we experience here in the Catskills. We kind of have extremes. And so she shifted her approach to an ecological approach to garden design. What that means is that you use native plants, you're using the animals, you're using the insects in your garden, and humans working together to create stability, balance, and resilience, which also often minimizes the need for costly inputs of materials, of labor. So you're really helping your pocketbook and you're helping your climate. Very importantly, gardens with ecology at heart and native plants as foundation are beautiful and biodiverse, speaking to the human soul while supporting pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. So we definitely encourage you to stay for Karin's next, come to her next speech as well in July. And if you guys don't know as much as you'd like to about the pollinator pathway, or you'd like to get your property registered, if you want to be on the email list and get more information, the website is woodstocknewyorkpollinatorpathway.org. So please check that out also, and enjoy your evening. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming.
Hi, everyone. Hang on just a second. Let me get this up and running here. Share screen. Here you go. Okay. Okay, we have a bit, Ellie, we have a bit of a problem. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry about that. Let me fix that for you right now. Okay, Karen, you should be good to go. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, let's do it this way. Slideshow. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're good. Hi, everybody. My name is Karin Ursula Edmondson from Karin Ursula Landscapes. I'm thrilled to be back with everybody to help you get to know your landscape better. And primarily, the tools we're going to be using are site inventory and site analysis, which is the very same methods that I use to get to know other people's landscapes. You have the advantage because you are living full-time 24/7 on your landscape. So you are going to be checking out and observing in all seasons, in all weather, times of day, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to start off with a history, a little bit about landscape design, because that is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be creating your own pollinator garden. So you're going to be placemaking and you're going to be designing. And I'm going to be showing a few photos, some beautiful examples as inspiration. Inspiration is very important to me when I'm designing. And I highly encourage everybody to go and visit some local gardens, nurseries, and arboretums. And as part of your handouts, there's a list of local and semi-local inspiring gardens. Catskill Native Nursery, for one, that's a nursery. Most of you have probably been there, but they also, Diane and Francis, have their own house gardens and display beds that are magical, delightful, and super inspirational. And then in Tannersville is the Mountaintop Arboretum. They also have specialized gardens. They have a garden for birds and they have a rain garden. And so I highly encourage everyone to go visit the Arboretum to see what type of native plants they're using for the site conditions, and also how they are combining plants, right? Because that's important. The type of plant, right place, and how to combine for beauty. And then the other garden, native plant garden, that you might not know about is in Phoenicia, and it's at the Phoenicia Library, which is right now temporarily closed to the public, but as soon as they open, make sure to go and visit, because that's a great example of a smaller native plant garden. So the Arboretum is open. You don't need an appointment. You can just go, but you do need to wear a face mask. So what is landscape design? It is basically placemaking, as I said. It is recreating beauty as it's a narrative of a relationship between human beings and their world. And one step further is ecological landscape design, which is taking into account the ecology of a place, which is, yes, our needs and desires, humans, but also all the other critters that live in the plants and the critters that live in that place. We have to design our gardens with everybody in mind. Hang on, I'm gonna try and get rid of, I can't, whoops, okay, never mind. All right, we're gonna start with Queen Hatshepsut Funerary Temple in Egypt. And I find this very interesting. This is very formal example of landscape design, linear, ceremonial, meant to instill, you know, grandeur. She was a queen after all, but it is the earliest recorded historical description of B&B. And for those of you who don't know what B&B means, it's short for balled and burlapped. Plants usually come two ways, comes in containers, pots, or they come B&B'd, wrapped up in burlap with their root ball intact. They're usually larger plants. So way back in ancient Egypt, they were using balled and burlap plants, just like we do today. Kind of cool. Japanese gardens, big favorite. I get a lot of requests for, oh, I'd like, you know, the peace and tranquility of a Japanese garden. And despite the sort of naturalistic placement of everything. There is so much work and precision that goes into creating and designing one of these gardens. Like every rock is selected for its own unique beauty and put into its own unique place. The Alhambra in Spain, which is the melding of interior space and exterior space. Landscape design is paradise, and some of the plants were allowed to keep their natural shape. Here is a very modern example of that indoor-outdoor partnership. The outdoor garden at the MoMA very follows the interior of the building. Inside is an art museum, outside is an art museum. You're just looking at the artwork and the sculpture in a garden. So a really, really excellent example of the connecting of indoor and outdoor spaces. Versailles, this is more of a triumph of man over nature. This site originally was very swampy and full of mosquitoes, and Lenotre had to figure out a way how to drain all of this, drain this site. This is not ecological landscape design. And then they imposed a very formal design, again, to instill grandeur on this location. A lot of topiary. Then we move to the English pastoral tradition, where the gardens and landscape were free from artifice, but again, this was a designed landscape. Many of the trees were brought in large, mature. Instead of kubotas, they used oxen or horses and carriages to bring the trees in. And many of the smaller creeks and streams were dammed up to create lakes. So again, it looks really natural, but it's a designed landscape. Central Park, New York City. Can anyone imagine what New York would be like without Central Park? Pretty unimaginable. If you are wanting to know more about the history of landscape design, this is a great book. It's really in-depth, it's very large, it's very heavy. Elizabeth Barlow Rogers is the author. It's an exhaustive survey. So what is ecological landscape design? Ecological landscaping is a method of designing, building, and maintaining landscapes that consider the ecology of the site. So as mentioned before, it is working with existing site conditions. For example, if you have a wet, swampy area, that's prime site condition to create a wet meadow or a bog garden, and that would be ecological gardening. The opposite of that would be saying, oh no, I don't like this wet, I want lawn here, or I want it dry, and then you bring in the backhoe and the excavator and you drain it and you fill it and you put the lawn over it. That is not ecological gardening. So ecological landscape design, you're working with the site conditions you already have. The wild garden at Gravetree Manor, William Robinson, he was an Irishman. He was credited to be the first to sort of bring this sort of wildish, where plants are intermingled, landscape design to popularity. The High Line, New York City is an example of this too. There's a lot of native plants used there. There are some that are not native, and they are worked in a very, they were planted by Pete Udolph in a very naturalistic, breathtaking, actually, pattern. The High Line is currently closed. It is on the list in your handouts, but they are currently closed to the public. There's a couple of some of my favorite examples of very effective design. This is a more formal application of it. Again, like in the funeral temple for Queen Hatshepsut, you have that linear access, that linear middle line that draw, and then the urn at the end that draws your eye down the garden pathway, excuse me, and on either side you have that symmetrical planting, an alley of trees. But the designer here, Edwina von Gaal, she kind of mixed things up and made the underplanting of the trees very naturalistic, which is a great design tool to use to sort of do that contrast between formal and more wild. And also Edwina von Gaal, this is a more, you know, a wildish sort of design. You're walking through a grove of trees. The path is curved, it's not straight. The path is sort of coaxing you to explore beyond that curve, what lies beyond that. These trees that she used are American fringe tree, and they are hardy to zone 4. Catskill Native Nursery can get them for you if they don't have them already in stock. It's a beautiful understory tree, especially in spring when she blooms and the flowers are white fringes, hence her name, American fringe tree. Formal and wild design mix. This is sort of trendy these days to do very like topiary or even boxwood. You don't need to topiary your boxwood. You don't even need to shear your boxwood, but you have some sort of structural plant there. An evergreen, a conifer would work too, that has heft and bulk, and then you plant a very wildish design around it. Pete Udolph again, this is a garden essentially with 3 plants, and it's the way you plant, and this is massing and drifting of plants. Instead of planting 1 plant or even 3, you get a line of them, 5 to 7, and you plant in a drift. And these are Allium millennium in the front, echinacea or coneflower in the center, and then in the back it looks like a type of switchgrass or panicum. Northwind is one of my favorites. Ginny Blom, British. Gardening is in their blood for some reason. Beautiful mix of wildflowers and roses and more formal trees limbed up. Like really, really stunning garden work. Again, the highly stylized, very formal reflecting pool, basically what looks like surrounded by a very wild, unmowed meadow. So this is not everyone's taste, but it might be appealing to some of you. Again, that contrast and that juxtaposition of the formal and the wild, especially if you have hardscaping. Fernando Caruncho, he's a Spaniard, known for his very contemporary designs, clean, spare. And here it's the pool and those long, wide steps and that beautiful, wide, squat sort of door, the color of the house. And then 1 plant. Now, when this one plant, this one species of plant, I should say, blooms, it's breathtaking. The downside to only using 1 plant is that after she blooms, you're left with green. Larry Weiner and Associates complementary meadow and wall design. This is a meadow with a simple mown path, very easy to do. And the beauty about something like this is you can change the path every year. So we have the wildness of the meadow juxtaposed against the solidity of that stone wall, and then a vine. Very simple. Again, 3 different elements really, right? And this is a very evocative, beautiful landscape. Meaningful public spaces. This is actually a parking lot. Behind this beautiful planting is a parking lot with those lights there. If only our parking lots here would be this instead of the red mulch and the poor single plants all alone in that vast sea of red mulch. We can wish, we can hope. And here we go, it's sort of the local legends, Diane Greenberg and Francis Groders of Catskill Native Nursery, their native plant cottage garden. That's their house in the back. This is their foundation bed, and it's a mixture of native shrubs and understory trees, and then various size perennials in layers. Really beautiful. Pollinator heaven. This is a meadow foundation planting that we did for a client off of West Saugerties Road. We installed it 3 years ago. This photo was taken last year, and in July, it's just buzzing with all sorts of bees and pollinators. It's 100% native plants. And a lot of grasses, because the site was very dry and rocky, and ornamental grasses and native grasses do really well in dry sun and rocky soil conditions. Native plant spiral garden, again, if your tastes lean to really formal, you can do all sorts of formal designs, spiral design, and then you can use entirely native plants in there. Our native plants are very adaptable. So, how do we get there, right? To build a house, you need a blueprint. To build a garden, you need a landscape plan. You're not going to be drawing anything like this, but still, this is the finished product of site inventory and site analysis. And it is And all good design, all good designers, all designers worth their weight start with site inventory. There's just no way around it. Just like you're building a house, you have to have blueprints, you have to have a plan. You need to know what your land is telling you before you can design and put plants and create gardens. So site inventory is the first step in the design and planting process. It takes note of existing site conditions. Site conditions are the character of your land. And then after you take stock, you're going to map it out. So you're going to end up with a base map that you then work off of to choose your plants. I suggest getting some sort of notebook. It doesn't have to be a sketch pad. It could be a marbled notebook, any sort of, or a folder where you can put your measurements, right? Your notes, your plant list, inspirations torn out from magazines. People still subscribe to magazines, I don't know. Just keep everything together, it'll be helpful. So your site inventory list is basically what's already on your land, the existing architecture, house, barn, shed, art studio, if you're in Woodstock, garage, major trees and garden beds, existing hardscapes, walkways, driveways, decks, existing views, borrowed views. Borrowed views, I mean views that aren't on your land. Like if you're at the top of a mountain and you have this beautiful view of, you know, the Catskill Mountain range, that's your borrowed view. That's not actually your garden. Topography, is your land sloped or is it flat? The sunlight patterns, the 4 directions, directional and prevailing winds, drainage and water patterns, wet areas, dry areas, what zone? If you're down in Woodstock or Saugerties, you're going to be zone 5. If you are Phoenicia, Shandake, and Westkill, you are zone 4, definitely, because it's always colder because of the elevation. Also, animal traffic, deer, rabbits, bear, soil. Is it gravelly? Is it sandy? Is it clay? Does it hold water or does it drain fast? Site inventory is getting to know your landscape because you're really looking. You're poking around, you're getting down on your hands and knees and seeing what's there. And it kind of looks like this. And you're going to be doing something like this for our next class or presentation. You're going to be going out, taking a site inventory, and you're going to be drawing it like this. And it's not going to be looking pretty, and it can be, you come up with your own method of labeling things, but it has to have a lot of information on it so then you can work off of it to choose your plants. And these are just, again, this is an example. You can do it this way. The house is usually, you know, in the center of the drawing. The line depicting the house is boulder, trees, circles. Here's another example of how you can do it, how you can draw it and map it out. Make your notes. This is for you to look at. You don't have to show it to anyone. You're not going to show it to me. It's for your own education, getting to know your landscape. So you're going to measure everything, right? You're going to measure the house and any other architecture you have on your land. Plant materials, major plant materials. If you have a giant maple tree in your front yard that's shading part of your house or part of your land, that maple tree goes on your site plan, on your base map. Any hardscaping, if you have fences, if you have walls, if you have patios, if you have walkways, water features, pools, ponds, streams, parking areas, driveway, utility, above ground and underground too. Dig Safely New York is a free service that if you don't know where your underground utilities are, it's been a while, or you just moved into a house and there's no record or whatever, you can get in contact with them, these folks, and they will put together a map for you. It's a free service. The history of your land. Try and find this out as best as possible. If your land was a cow pasture, odds are your soil is going to be a little more fertile. You're going to have all that rotting, composting cow manure there. On the flip negative side, if it was agricultural use, were there pesticides or herbicides used? More information you can gather, the better. And then you scale it. You can use a ruler. I use an engineer scale, which is, looks like this. You can get it at Blick's Art Supply or Catskill Art in Woodstock. I'm not sure if Catskill Art is open yet. A good scale for a larger map is 1 inch equals 10 feet. Scaling illuminates the spatial relationships, which is really important. Also, then when you go to source your plant material, you will know exactly how many plants you will need for a certain area because you will have scaled everything to size. And then you just count what's on your map. But that's for a point further on down the line. So that's the engineer's scale. To drawing your base map. It's not going to be pretty because it's not supposed to be pretty. It's a map, it's a foundation. You're going to need a measuring tape. This is all on your these lists are on your handouts too. Measuring tape, a Sharpie or a pencil, a roll of paper, tracing paper or other large sheet of art paper is fine. It's great to have a partner to do this, to hold the other end of the measuring tape. Always start with the architecture, so measure your house first, and then like that maple tree again, that's in your front yard. Locate the maple tree using your house as a reference point. So measure your house, put it on the paper, and then take the measuring tape from your house out to the tree, measure the distance. That's how you do it. Always work off the architecture. Marking windows and doors on the house also is important because, well, the door obviously, but windows, where your windows are inside, your bedroom, your living room, your kitchen window. Do you sit every morning at the kitchen and stare out into your garden area? That's all important because when you're designing your outside area, you want to keep in mind your inside area to enhance, your pleasure when you're sitting inside looking out at what you're going to create. It's just another example of how you could draw. This is a little more formal, this drawing. You can keep it as simple as this. You can get fancy and use colors like this on it. I usually do everything in black and white until I'm ready to present to the client. It's just simpler for me that way, less time. Existing plant materials. It can be as simple as a circle or little squiggly lines, or just a round circle for deciduous trees and bunch of lines intersecting each other like this for conifers. Keep it really simple. More examples of how you can draw your trees and your shrubs and your perennials. If you want to get fancy, you don't have to. This is a great book, reference book for landscape graphics. This is on one of your handouts. A lot of examples in there. Sunlight and wind pattern, all this stuff goes on your site inventory base map. Existing water features, drainage patterns, flow, right? You can use colors if you want, blue for water, pink for sun, yellow for the sun, pink for wind, actually, yellow for the sun. Soil conditions, again, is it dry? Is it wet? If it's wet, is it wet year round? Or is it a vernal pool? Or does it just get really, do you get like 3 inches of water after we have a heavy rain and then 2 days later it's gone? All these things will inform what plants are going to be happy at your garden locations. Is it sand? Is it clay? Sunny, shady, acid, alkaline? Most soils in the Catskills I found are moderately acid, depending on where you are. New house constructions to fill directly around the house can tend to be more alkaline because they bring in sand sometimes for the fill, or they bring in, it's raining and my truck windows are open, or they bring in gravel for fill, and all that creates a more alkaline soil. So, and soil matters. So this is a tree, the chokecherry tree, Prunus virginiana, native, prefers alkaline soils, as you can see. Here she is growing right outside, right out of a rock cliff face. Pretty amazing. I really admire plants that do this. And I was thinking of using the chokecherry for a client in Pine Hill, and that site is not dry, rocky, or alkaline. So guess what? I'm not using that plant. because when I choose plants for my designs, I like to make the best informed decision I can and put them where they would be happiest. So site inventory works for smaller garden areas too. You can do a big space. If you have a huge landscape, you can also take the same thing if you just have a little garden plot in back of your house. You know, if you don't have any trees in the back of your house and your neighbor does, those trees are going to affect your garden because of the shade they're going to create at certain times of the day. Just another example of how to draw. So the site analysis part of it, after you've inventoried everything and drawn everything, drawn your map, then then you start to the critical thinking, like the wind patterns. Is your site very protected? Great. Is it open on a mountaintop like I have with a sunny meadow? It's sunny almost, the whole day, and then the winds come. Oh my God, the winds sweep it through there. So that is going to inform if you have high winds. Maybe you're going to want to put some buffers or not, or just work with the wind, right? Water flow. A slope, if your garden's on a slope, it's going to drain a lot faster than if you're at the bottom of a slope and all that water pools there, right? The sun shade patterns, again, the trees create shade, obviously too, but so does architecture. That's a big one that sometimes people forget. What side of the house gets morning sun? What side of the house gets afternoon sun? There's different plants that some plants like morning sun, which is a lot less harsh than afternoon sun. Other plants really thrive in that hot, dry sun that beats down and wilts the rest of us that are out there working in the garden. The views, if you are blessed with great views, awesome. If you aren't and you have a next door neighbor or, I don't know, just something you want to hide, think about that. Taller plants, screening. And the critters, that's a big thing in the Catskills, especially around Woodstock. I find that those of you in the Woodstock area have more deer pressure than I have all the way up in Westkill. So you have to think about that as well. Evaluate and make judgments about the worth and importance of the condition. So I mentioned that swampy area again. And if you have a swampy area, this is a blessing because there's so many beautiful plants that grow in these conditions, or rushes and grasses like sedges, these tussock sedge. It's just beautiful. Like, why would you even want to go in there and destroy something like that? Just for their own beauty. And then, that sort of ecological situation supports its own wildlife. So you kind of want to leave it alone or enhance it, right? So if you have a really wet area, it's not the end of the world. There's shrubs and there are perennials and there are grasses that you can use to make this a beautiful area for you and for the critters as well, for the pollinators. Inventory and analysis. Okay, again, erosion. If you have erosion from a steep slope, maybe add a retaining wall. If you have a busy street on the north side, use a hedge to buffer the noise. Sunny areas, sun-loving plants, herb gardens, vegetable gardens, fruit trees, a meadow. Shady areas, shade gardens. And there's a lot to do with shade too. Don't get discouraged with that. There's a beautiful palette of shade-loving plants. Moss gardens, woodland gardens, seeding areas. Also in summers, when summers are getting hotter and hotter and hotter, up here, the last few summers, it's been close to 100, which is unheard of for elevation 2,300 feet where I'm at. So it's just getting hotter. Things are getting hotter in the summer. Things are getting drier. Things are getting warmer or maybe colder in the winter. I don't know. But these native plants, they're sort of built better for those fluctuations than non-natives. More screening. You can screen with a fence, or you can screen with plants, or a mixture of a fence and a plant. You can get really creative. Steep slope, you might want to retain it. That was a very formal retaining wall. This is a very informal boulder retaining wall. This is one of the ones that we did up in Chichester. We didn't do the wall, that was Mike Formont, but we did the entire planting plan here. It was almost 100% native, not quite. So plant deciduous trees. So bare branches allow winter sunshine to warm the house, right? And then you want to plant the conifers on the north side of the house to help block the wind when the wind comes in, blows down the mountain. So you're using plants for strategic situations that you know you have because you've done your site inventory and now you're analyzing your site inventory. Also, plant materials can tell us a lot about soils and water content. Learning to look at groupings and plant communities. This is something I always do when I go into a new garden, right? What's growing there already? That's what you're going to be doing. What's growing there? This is a plant community that we've all probably seen, a mixture of goldenrods and asters. And it's full sun, and the soils are probably more on the moist side because that's what those plants like. So if you have these growing in your garden, then you know a little bit about your soil conditions, right? And this is the exact opposite. This is the hemlock and the beech and the mountain laurel, which is very moist and damp. It's moist, but it's not waterlogged. Mountain laurels will not live in bogs. They like moist, rich soil from all those leaves falling, but they also like it well drained. Kind of rocky, well drained, moist and rocky. If you can think that's all in one site condition, it can be. So what's going to grow here and be happy? If you have this, you're going to be planting, you're not going to be planting goldenrods and asters. This is a perfect example. This was a new client I visited the other day. The house is 1 year old and they did not plant this. This grass started growing out of, it looks like shale, rock, pure rock. So if you got a very rocky site, look to your native ornamental grasses. I mean, they're growing here with zero help from anything except, you know, the rainfall, the natural rainfall and sun. And this is a hot, dry condition. It's right up against a house. It's right up against the deck. It's right next to a bluestone paver, and it's the mulch is shale, crushed stone. So this plant got me thinking about what to do around this house, right? Working with what's going to grow there the best, the easiest for you and for the critters. Same site. This was a hay-scented fern patch growing behind their art studio, right? Not planted, just starting to grow there. So again, I'm going to look to these hay-scented ferns and I'm going to use these in other areas in that landscape because obviously this plant is very happy here. The client probably doesn't even know it exists here and they're thriving and spreading and doing just fine. So these are the sorts of plant cues I'm talking about to start to look for on your property. This is an excellent book. It's a small book. It's about this size, right? Soft cover. Designing Gardens with Flora of the American East by landscape architect Carolyn Summers. She talks about different plant communities. I highly suggest you get it. I'm sure you'll find your plant community in this book, and then you can read more about what you have. So first you have to ID the plants that are growing on your site. And then you look up the plant community in here and you're going to have a much broader view about how to approach planting in your garden. And Carolyn Summers, actually, she is down in, where is she? Sullivan County. And she has a public garden there, Flying Trillium Gardens, and it is open by appointment now. It's all native plants. She does a lot of research and she works primarily with native plants. I suggest visiting, making an appointment and visiting Flying Trillium Gardens in Sullivan County to learn more, to be inspired, to take notes. So site inventory and analysis, that's it. Measure, draft. Good luck and thank you very much. And I think we're at 7:39 right now. And I'm going to stop my share. Ellie, back to you.
Thank you. I'm going to have Caroline come on now, and she's going to moderate our Q&A session. Thank you, Caroline.
Okay. Oh no, the host has stopped it. Hello, everybody. Well, that was most interesting. and I kind of feel like I got sent to the drawing board. So quite literally. I think it's kind of easy for us all to get the cart before the horse. But let me just take a look here and see. Got some questions that are popping in. So I just wanted to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, if you're on the Zoom webinar, there's a Q&A. If you put your cursor over the bottom of the screen, you'll see that on the right-hand side, and that would be the place to type in your question. If you're watching the Facebook live stream, there's a comment section, and you can type in your question there. And we are looking for questions mostly that are on the topic of tonight's presentation. I know Karin was telling us ahead of time that one thing she won't be able to answer right now is specific questions about what plant can you plant in a certain spot, because there's just too many variables, and really have to come and see the site with her own 2 eyes and see the soil and the sun and shade and the wind, everything that she was just talking about. So if we say, oh, I have a shady spot, or oh, I have a sunny spot, what's the right thing? That's not a question that really can be answered right here, right now. So meanwhile, those are mostly the kinds of questions that I have so far. But I guess there's a question here that is about what you talked about, which was considering the wildlife, the existing wildlife. Like, what do you recommend doing about deer and other ravenous munchers?
So deer, yeah, the perennial deer issue. There are about three plants that they will never eat. Unfortunately, one is Japanese barberry. The other one is burning bush. They're both invasive, and you don't want to plant those, and they're illegal to plant actually now in New York State. Boxwood's another one they will never eat, and you can use, it's not native, but you can use it as that structure I talked about in and among your beautiful native wildflowers and other plants. And then there's also Sunny Boulevard shrubby St. John's wort, which I don't know why they don't eat, but they don't. And it's a beautiful pollinator plant, and it self-sows. But with deer, so you want to look for plants that are labeled deer resistant, but even a plant that's labeled deer resistant, if they're hungry enough, they're going to eat it, right? Just like if we're hungry enough, we will eat anything. But there are things how you can plant. Like what I'm starting to do is using grasses as buffers in between, in front of and in between plants that deer might eat. I use the grasses kind of as a buffer and a barrier in a beautiful aesthetic way, of course, so that the deer, when they walk up to the bed, they'll hit the grass first and be like, oh, there's really nothing here. They won't. I'm told they're lazy. Deer are lazy. They won't go digging deeper into the bed. So this is something I'm experimenting with. Also, plants that have very strongly scented foliage, alliums, onions, garlic, sages, salvias, things like that, catnip, catmint. Although it's not a native, it is a really good pollinator plant. But foliage that is either thick and fleshy, like sedums also, or strongly scented, they tend to avoid.
So if you put those around the edges, they might be discouraged.
Yes.
And
ornamental grasses are really great because they come in like 1 to 2 foot tall, 3 foot tall, and round and moundy. And then you have the tall upright ones like the Northwind and Shenandoah and things like that that can get 4 to 6 to 7 to 8 feet tall, and kind of like miscanthus, that shape. And they're very beautiful, and they're low maintenance, and the deer don't eat them. So if you can, I mean, they won't work for shade gardens, but they will work for part sun and sunny areas for sure. So if you can incorporate them, use them for just beauty, for ground nesting birds, for their seed heads, provide food for birds, and as deer buffers.
And how tall does the shrubby St. John's wort get?
3 foot by 3 foot. Catskill Native Nursery has it.
But that's tall enough to keep the deer, or that's just something they won't eat?
That's just something in my experience they haven't touched.
They don't like. Okay.
I mean, yeah, in this one garden we put in, that West Saugerties Road garden, the first year they ate even the yucca. I mean, they didn't decimate the yucca, but they came and nibbled on the yucca, and yucca is labeled as deer resistant. So nope, not really, but they haven't come back to eat the yucca, and they've never touched the shrubby St. John's wort. Maybe they don't like the leaf. I don't know.
Okay. So you were talking about identifying the plants that are already growing on our properties, in particular the ones that are just popping up, the wild plants, because somehow they think it's a good place for them to grow and thrive there. So I have a question that's, do you have a recommendation for a tool to use to identify those plants?
You can hire a local native landscape designer, a professional to come in and help you ID that. There are several apps. I don't use the apps because I've had some bad experiences with them, that they're completely off, but try using the apps. Also, that Carolyn Sumner's book will be really helpful, and any sort of book that showcases native plants. That has a photo of them and a little description, like Native Plants of the Northeast by Donald J. Leopold is a simple, straightforward book that you can just tuck under your arm and go out into your garden with.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, you suggested finding someone to help you. Someone is asking about finding someone to do the work. Now, I don't know if they mean the landscape site inventory and analysis, or if they're talking about different kind of work, but let's just keep it to the topic of tonight's presentation. How do you suggest finding someone who can help you identify these native plants?
In the presentation I gave, I think it was March, was it March? The very first one, there was a source list. I can resend that again to Ellie, and I list several reputable local landscape designers, nurseries, consultants, things like that, landscape architects. Right,
okay. So, and you mentioned several books. Someone is asking about online resources to view all these different kinds of gardens, and the photos. And
so one of your handouts, which Ellie is going to be emailing to everyone tomorrow, is a helpful websites list. Okay. And so yes, you're going to be getting that information tomorrow. And one of them is the Ecological Community of New York State. Then there's the Audubon Guide to Native Plants. There's a couple of Audubon ones, and then the Xerxes Society and the Cornell Cooperative Extension, if you want to get your soil tested. So yes, it's coming tomorrow, helpful websites.
Okay. This is kind of a plant question, but not about whether it'll grow in a certain spot. It says, do you have any suggestions for bushes that will attract birds that are also deer resistant? Are viburnum attractive to deer? What about fruit-bearing trees and bushes? Are they all attractive to deer? Deer and bears on our property.
Yes, pretty much. Some are more attractive than others. Some viburnums have tougher leather, more thicker fibrous leaves that are less attractive. But again, if you're going to plant a lot of shrubs like that, consider, if your site conditions allow, intermingling some taller native grasses in between there to act as the buffer.
Okay.
So deer are kind of, I mean, if you're in Woodstock, you have deer all the time, but so I have rhododendrons that my mother planted in front of my house for years and years and years. They were fine. And then last winter they came and ate half of them. I don't know, new deer family in town? I have no idea. Did they change their route? You know, so also spraying helps. There's all sorts of natural sprays. It's tedious. You have to go out there after heavy rains and things, but these sprays are made of mint and garlic and putrefied egg solids. And you could spray that on your shrubs to help set up a barrier as well. Not ideal, but
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then the one day you don't do it is when they come by.
Right.
So what kind of fencing, if any, do you like to use?
I've never used deer fencing.
Never used deer fencing.
No.
That's
But if you're going to use deer fencing, get 6 foot or taller.
right.
Oh, mountain mints. Plants in the mint, not spearmint, but mountain mint. Bee balm they will eat. Mountain mints they tend to leave alone. And mountain mint is a great pollinator plant.
Right. Okay. So this one's a little bit off the topic, but I think we're gonna try it anyway. I have a small meadow area, about 20 by 30 feet, filled with a mixture of grasses and herbaceous plants, the majority of which are native. I would like to add some plants to this area for more color and to aid pollinators. What is the best way to do this? Maybe dig up little areas and put other plants in. If I do this, how do I keep the new plants from being overwhelmed by those already there? I don't want to dig the whole area up and start all over again.
Yeah, you know, that's something I've always wanted to try. And I guess I'm trying in my own meadow here. Like I've put some bee balm in certain places, and I think I'm going to put some cup plants as well. But yeah, that's right on. Dig up a little area, maybe mulch it. Mulch the area right around where you put the new plant. The goal is to get that new perennial to grow and thrive and set seed, right? And then the wind, the pollinators, whoever, the seed dispersal then is what you want to self-sow in other parts of the meadow. It does happen. I've seen that. I've seen it happen where people sow wildflower seeds or put in native perennials, like say by your garage on a sunny rocky slope. And then the next year, some of those plants have blown like over the house, back of the house to another sunny slope where they've never put any seed mixes in. So once you establish native wild perennials that can go to seed and the seed dispersal happens on its own, on their own, they will spread. It is your job to get the first group of plants established and protected from deer or whatever else. And once you get a patch established, it's going to start spreading. I've seen it happen many times. It's incredible. Like literally, the plants get blown over the house, boom, and into the back where it wasn't even touched to begin with.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah. Here's a good one. How can you tell about drainage?
So with drainage, you know, if you have a really bad drainage problem near your house or any sort of architecture or, you know, hardscaping like that, plants aren't really going to help. You got to call a drainage expert. Plants, how you can tell if you have bad drainage or if the water drains into a certain area and it holds and it doesn't drain out, you know, it kind of depends on where that area is. You can do a rain garden. Plants that will help, you know, hold that soil, contain that soil, capture that water into the soil. But if it's anywhere near architecture or it's going to start undermining, it's, you know, get a really good drainage expert in there. You might have to lay some pipe and do some excavating.
So how can you tell whether, you know, a place is well drained or, you know, not so well drained, just in general, like evaluating the whole property? Soil.
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually I look for wet spots or where plants that enjoy moist conditions are growing. Right now, we haven't had a whole lot of rain. So I wouldn't be able to tell so much from the soil conditions, but more so from the plants that are probably growing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been really dry. What if my site has a lot of poison ivy or invasive plants?
Yeah, invasive plants. We ran into that today. Poison ivy. There's a couple of poison ivy removal specialist companies in the Hudson Valley. Maybe call one of them if you have a lot. I will pull poison ivy every now and then, but I'm not allergic to it. I know some people are deadly allergic to it, so it depends on your situation. Other things like Oriental bittersweet, I pull out too when I can. And it's also a matter of picking your battles. Like if your woodland is overrun with that, I don't know, it's a personal choice. You're going to go out there and you're going to try and remove it all, or you're just going to focus on the area, you know, closest to your house where, you know, high use area, your garden areas, things like that. Invasive plants are major problems. The poison ivy, that's, you know, that's personal. You know, I pull it for some of my clients. I'm very careful. I wear gloves. I wash them. My crew is very highly allergic, so they don't go near it. So again, but we're not pulling out vast forests full or vast gardens of them. It's a plant here or there, you know. So maybe calling the poison ivy experts is the best bet.
I've heard you can get goats brought in to help with the poison ivy. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of that, and I haven't tried that yet.
Okay. Yeah, it's an intriguing idea. As long as the goats are not hard to get rid of when you're done with them. Anyway, let's see. Somebody's asking about living in Quarryville. Lots of rock and shallow soil. I guess probably the answer is going to be the same thing, like walk around and look and see what's growing.
Yeah, absolutely. You might have some sweet fern there. You might have some sedges that like it like that. You might have some like hay-scented ferns. It all kind of depends. There's also Prairie Moon Nursery that has seed mixes for dry clay, subsoil, dry areas like that. Areas like that, maybe starting if there's no plants already on site, just trying to get seeds going, because once those seeds get going, those little roots will find their way down through the soil, just like that chokecherry I showed you. She's growing in a very improbable location. You would never plant a tree in a rock, but there she is, because her little seed got sown there, and those roots are managing and finding their way. So a seed mix for hot, dry sun, clay, hard pan, Prairie Moon Nursery, they have that seed mix. Mm-hmm. Try that, because again, once you can get something established there, and a seed in that location is a lot easier to get established with proper care and watering and everything else than a containerized plant that you got to dig in this horrible rocky soilless condition, you know. Seeds, way to go there. Right. Prairie Moon Nursery, prairiemoon.com.
Okay. Let the little plants do the work, right?
Absolutely. Like the chokecherry, very inspiring. Or the hemlocks that you see growing out of rock face, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, someone's very persistent to ask about bear. How to design with bear nearby?
I've never had an issue with bear, other than here once one got into my plum tree and broke a couple of branches one year, and that's it. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Bears like fruit, blueberries, raspberries, peaches, apples. So you have fruit trees, you might have bear. Also honey, if you keep honeybees, you might have bear. But I find that I can't really address that because I haven't had major bear issues. So they tend to stay away. But then down in that area where you are, also in Phoenicia, people leave the garbage, the restaurants and things, they go in more. But
designing with bear nearby, get everyone around you to handle their garbage correctly. That's probably the first design element you need. Someone's mentioning that northern bayberry is native and deer resistant also in their experience.
That's a good plant.
What do you recommend to plant so animals like woodchucks and rabbits can be part of the landscape?
Plant a lot plant a very wild, sort of wildish landscape, so that if you're missing a few plants, you don't really notice it. Because that terrace garden with the boulders I showed you is like half an amphitheater, semicircular garden. There's definitely woodchucks there. The owners have a camera. They've seen them on camera. They're digging and burrowing but we don't notice the damage because it's such a wild garden.
So be willing to share.
Yeah.
Okay, dreaded bamboo. I have someone digging it out. What is a good replacement plant that is not another undesirable?
I can't really answer that. Depends on what you're trying to do, or you're trying to screen, or the site conditions. But getting rid of that bamboo is going to be quite a, because those roots go really deep. Good luck.
Okay. Let's see. Someone's asking about the title of the Leopold book.
Oh, Native Plants of the Northeast by Donald J. Leopold.
And that's probably on the handout, right?
It's not going to be on this handout. It was on the handout from March. So Ellie has that. It's called Bibliography.
I think those materials are available still on our website.
Okay, so then there. Or any of the books by Rick Dark. He has one called The Woodland Garden, I think. That's a really good one too.
Okay, let's see if I missed anything. What do you think bees are eating now?
Clovers still. And I've seen them on rhododendrons. What else have I seen them on? I'm blanking right now. The bee balms are not blooming yet. The milkweeds are just starting in your area. They're not near starting here.
The milkweeds are blooming in my yard.
Oh yeah, down by you. Yep.
Yeah.
So, lawn things in your lawn that you've left growing out. Self-heal, vanilla, things like that.
Yeah. White clover.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you fertilize, and how?
No, for native plants, and we'll get more into that 2 weeks from now. No, native plants they don't like rich, yummy soil. They're fine and happy with just what's there, that we instinctively consider as thin, poor soils. That's what they're adapted to. And they can live in something like that without fertilizer or amendments, because those roots go down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet. So they're accessing water and nutrients at a deeper level. The only things I ever fertilize are rhododendrons, and it's with hollytone from Espoma, or blueberries with a soil acidifier, also Espoma, because blueberries like it really, really acid. But other than that, I don't fertilize. None of the meadow gardens ever get fertilized, ever.
Okay, we just have a few more minutes, a couple more minutes for questions. Let me see if there are any hiding in a spot where I haven't looked for a minute. Let's see. Well, I think maybe the questions. Whoops. Someone's mentioning that bees are also on the foxglove right now, the native yellow foxglove. Probably.
Yes.
They're eating that right now too.
Yes, foxgloves are wonderful plants for part shade, part sun. If you don't have any small children or dogs that like to eat plants, they're great because they are mildly toxic.
Okay. So I think that we have reached the end of the questions, because I'm not seeing any more coming in. Well, let's see. Someone says, what plants would indicate a moist area?
Boneset, Verbena hastata, I forget the common name for that. Milkweeds, although milkweeds also grow rose milkweed, but the common milkweed grows along roadsides where it's kind of dry, but also in ditches. So she's an adaptable plant. Cattails, rushes, certain types of sedges. But boneset, that's a big one. Catskill Native Nursery sells boneset, but it's probably growing wild in a lot of places that you might have already. Mountain mints also like it kind of moist. Winterberry shrubs like it moist, but also adaptable. Buttonbush will grow out of swamp. Insane. Like it can get flooded for a year or so and still grow. Plants are amazing.
Jewelweed?
Jewelweed, yeah, moist, also adaptable, but yeah, more moist soils.
Here's a question. Where can you plant psilocybes? I don't know if I pronounced it right. Psilocibes.
I don't know that.
I don't know what that is either. Okay, so I think we're just about at the end of our time here for tonight's program. So I want to thank you, Karin, for another wonderful presentation. And we're very lucky that you're going to be coming back because, I don't know, I think we're all just on pins and needles here. But we have to go out and do this before we can. We have to make our sketches and take our measurements. And it's very important. You can't just go out and start digging holes.
No.
And no impulse buys at the nursery either. It's not allowed.
Impulse buys. Gosh, I'm guilty of that.
Okay, yeah, but you know a lot more than the rest of us do. So
elderberry too. Elderberry, good for somewhat moist soils.
Moist soils?
Yes.
Okay. I thank everybody who helped get this together. Ellie is always behind the scenes doing a lot of work, and Alex, thanks for introducing the event tonight. And it's easy to qualify and join the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway. It's basically like it says on the logo. It's pesticide-free and native plants. And so if you just are committed to not using those herbicides and pesticides, and including native plants, and they're probably already growing there to tell you what your site conditions are. A lot of times it's about letting them be and letting them thrive there, making space for them by removing invasive foreign plants. And so anyway, it's not hard to qualify. It's not this big high bar. So you can go to the website, the Woodstock, New York, pollinatorpathway.org website, and the link is in the Zoom chat box, or you can, if you're on Facebook, you can find it there on the Facebook page. Certainly it'll be included in all of the follow-up communications to you. You can join the pathway there. You can subscribe to weekly emails that have a lot of information in them with resources and links and tips and photos, all kinds of things. And all of the handouts from this program that Karin has put together will be emailed to the Zoom attendees tomorrow. If you attended via Facebook, you can send us an email and ask for it, or also there will be a link to those, and they'll all be posted on the website as well. And the next event with Karin is going to be on July 9th at the same time at 7 p.m. And it's called Working with Your Landscape, Planting and Care of Native Plants. And it'll be the same length of time and also have a Q&A session. But we all have to do our homework first to be ready for that one. So I think we're going to be looking at the materials that you sent out and hopefully getting our pencils and paper out and doing the work. So thanks for that inspiration. And
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Next
nice to be back. Okay. Terrific.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.